The Strength Beyond Struggle podcast brings you mental health stories from the front lines. We're sponsored by Ending the Silence, a program by the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, funded by the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System. We bring you the stories of people with lived experience. We do not offer therapy for any mental health condition and cannot substitute for professional assessment and treatment. In every episode, we deal with difficult mental health topics, including suicide. So if you're struggling, remember, you can always get help by calling 988. Hey, welcome today. I have with me Sierra Grande, who's a 29-year-old and a rock star. I got to tell you, I'm impressed talking to her. She's discovered that she's going to do her own thing to really live her best life because she lives with a host of diagnoses that create what she calls a neurodivergent way of looking at life. And this has led her to a really cool concept called gamification. And at this point, I'm going to let you explain what that is, Sierra, and what you do with it.
Amazing. Thank you, Michelle. So I didn't make up gamification. Gamification is an incredibly popular tool that a lot of people use. But if you've never heard of gamification, I'm very excited to be the one to teach you about it. Gamification is using game mechanics in everyday life and non-game situations. Examples of this can be seen everywhere. It's an incredibly popular thing. So you can see it in corporations. They use it a lot. And so you have like Duolingo, anything where there is like a tournament style, or there's levels, or there's experience points, characters, teams. All of these things are points of gamification. You're trying to reward yourself, have more fun, use it for personal life because it helps with my executive functioning. And so if you don't know what executive functioning is a set of mental skills that everyone has to manage and regulate themselves. So behavior, thoughts, emotions. It's often split into three components. It's your working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. And those with ADHD specifically have a very hard time with their executive functioning, but it affects most people with some form of neurodivergency, autism, or if you're looking broadly at mental health conditions. So with that,
can stress affect executive function? Yeah.
It affects everyone. Anything that is affecting your planning or your focusing or your attention. So if you're overly stressed, if you've had a long day, if you've had too much to drink, if you've been smoking, like there's things that affect it. And everyone has executive functioning. Some people will say that they have like executive dysfunction issues, which is outside the scope of like I have opinions on that term. But for the purpose of gamification, I use gamification and then I utilize positive psychology tools in order to blend that together into a system that I call Questify Your Life, where I make everything into a quest. So there's a couple of definitions there.
We're going to talk about quest because a lot of people, when they heard the word gamification, gaming, yada, yada, they instantly go, okay, you are isolating in a room with a technology. How is this going to help your mental health? And you're not talking about that, are you?
No, I'm not talking about, because I'm using outside, I'm talking about that a little because I think that games are an incredibly important tool for myself when it comes to like video games in order to kind of detach from what's happening and kind of like let the stress in my body simmer, or board games to have a social circumstance where I can play with my friends without having to worry too much about the social standards. But gamification is using the positives of those tools in order to help me in my daily life. So everything here on this board is actually a part of that, because if you write something down, it's more likely to get done. And that's just a philosophy I have with it. So part of my journey is to make sure that I write it down on the board so I can see it. And then from there, once it's complete, I put it into my little jar. And then from there, I scrapbook it. That way I can see how far I've come. Similar to like if you're playing a video game and there's a quest log. And so that's just one of the parts of the journey. I do levels. I have a sticker chart. I have more stuff over here that you can't see. It's very in depth. And I split it up into, 4 big components. You have quests. And a quest is different than a game. And I'll explain that in a moment. A journey, character, and then I also have dragons in this thought process. But so we'll start with quests and how that's different than a game. Call it
Please.
gamify my life. Rather, I call it Questify Your Life, because with a quest, I think of a quest as goal-based. So you have, like when you've been given a quest in Dungeons and Dragons, which is a very popular role-playing game where people will get together and tell a story together. They will create characters, and those characters, like they have complicated character sheets that aren't actually nearly as bad as you think they are. It just helps the game roll. And then you're just making up situations with your friends and using dice to push the story forward. So there's stakes and there's randomness and there is a game aspect to it. I love Dungeons and Dragons. Part of this is based on Dungeons and Dragons because you're focused on the story, the quest of it, rather than just having it be a game where there's like a ton of competition. There's a winner and a loser. For a quest, there doesn't necessarily always have to be a winner and a loser. Rather, there's a curiosity. Like, what are you trying to like find, achieve, do? And then from there, there's objectives. So how do you potentially get from A, the question, to B, the like whatever you've deemed is the finishing point of this quest? And then the objectives are the ideas you have to try to get there. You're never going to really know exactly how your quest is going to go until you're doing. And that's why I do this, because I get really stuck in my own feelings and then I don't do. So I'll just be like stuck in like, oh, well, I'll think about it. I'll really plan, but then I just won't get myself to do it because of the chance of failure. Failure is inevitable if you're going to do enough quests. So
Yes, well, yours could end up directing you in a direction you never thought you would go. You could go down a pathway and find a whole cave of gold. I don't know. A really cool partner, fellow journeyman to have an adventure with.
Exactly. And with that, I have there's so many different places where this could go, but one of them is the way that I suggest people, if they wanted to do this themselves, I always suggest that people start with trying to figure out their values. I did a values quest, which is basically, there's a bunch of different ways. You can like take quizzes, you can journal about it. I did a quest of like, the question is like, what do I value? And then the objectives were like, well, what are the options of values? So I looked up a bunch of different examples and then I rated those from like a 1 to 5 scale in an Excel sheet. And there was like 100 different things. And then I took it and I had what I put like most to least. So all of the ones that were 5s, I took and then I blended those together on like, there were like 10 of them. But I was just like, well, what are kind of similar? And so my values tend to be contribution, courage, and curiosity. Those are what like I follow, but not everyone does. So some people value stability, some people value money, some people value family. We all value these to a certain extent, but like your core values, the things that drive you, are good to know. That way you're not just doing quests for the sake of doing them because you're trying to compare yourself to other people. Because every quest is unique, every journey is unique.
So I'm sorry, go back to that concept of doing something for other people, because I have this, I think that one of a lot of our struggles as a society is being what I call other directed. And so you're saying with quests that they help you to focus on being self-directed?
Yes, but I don't want that to be like I'm aiming for you to be individualistic in it, because I think that like one of my journey principles, because I have like affirmations of sorts that I call my journey principles, and one of them is don't go at it alone. Like when you're adventuring in D&D or you're going and playing a game, like you have a companion, you have your team, you have other players, and so doing it alone is not the goal, but rather you don't want to have other people directing you in a way that doesn't align with your values. So an example for me is that I was almost a tax attorney, and I was very, very close to becoming a tax attorney. I had the job lined up, I took the bar, all of that. But if you kind of think about it from the idea of, does that meet contribution, curiosity, courage? Not really. It does meet a certain standard of like achievement, financial stability, and helpfulness for sure. That just wasn't going to be the right direction. Nobody was forcing me in that direction, but rather I was on that path. And I could have easily stayed on that path because it was the path of least resistance for me. But I had to make a pivot.
So what you said right there is actually kind of important because there's this classic idea that, people start a job and they just slog through it because they have to. What you just said right there is, no, no, no. You actually can take the time out to self-reflect. And the reason we're talking about this on a mental health podcast is this is critical. I mean, if you think about it, you're going to spend, if you're on an average job, 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, 40 hours out of your life. And you've got another, I don't know, 40 you sleep, and then you got 40 to do what. So you got this hours you've got. That's it. What are you going to do with those hours? And it sounds like your Questify Your Life, and that's important to your mental health, it sounds
100%.
like.
Well, for me, it is a key pillar of my mental health journey. Like, in order to stay in mental health recovery, use this tool. It is a flexible tool. I try to think of it as it needs to be useful, not perfect. That is how I go about this, where I chose, and also I had a bunch of I was very lucky in getting into mental health recovery. From there, I was able to be I can decide that what parts were my backstory, and then what parts are my adventuring story. Where does my hero's journey begin? And that was really empowering, and it allows me to make more mistakes without feeling like there's going to be incredibly heavy ramp
Consequences
for being wrong. Yeah, exactly.
So I got a question for you. So what was the moment that you went, I mean, is there a crisis moment or something that you just said, nothing else is working and I got to really do something different, so I'm just going to give this a try because what the heck? Or was it just a curiosity, or what was it that drove you and gave you this idea?
I've always liked gamification, games, and I had been seeing gamification happen all over the place. When I was getting into my mental health recovery, I was making lifestyle changes, but making things stick was really hard. And I was also studying for the LSAT around this time. And actually getting myself to do it was I couldn't see my progress. And the first kind of push into this was I needed a system where I could see my progress. So I started by using a bullet journal and making Tetris games in my bullet journal. So whenever I completed something, I'd put a little Tetris square in. And that was a game. It worked.
I mean, my daughter's the same way, and she's got, she's also mental health conditions, but the gaming people, my heart is just, I love you guys. I love how you love to play because life is, about play.
It is. And we get shamed a lot for playing. And I am a serious person. I try not to be. I try to work really hard against my perfectionism, against my type A, to a point where sometimes I overdo it and I end up accidentally type B just because I'm trying to push against it so much. But play is really important. It's important to be able to explore and have fun and just be silly and goofy without feeling like you're going to just be shamed for existing. And at the same time, the world is so heavy. And for people especially since mental health is a focus here, for people with mental health conditions, it's really obvious how heavy things are. Hurts. It physically hurts. And the other episode we did explains my story on all of that. But for me, I was able to give more once I started playing games and making quests. I call them dragon quests typically. A dragon in this system is a social justice issue of some sort, a systemic issue where there isn't one bad guy. Rather, there is this slew of systems that is broken and actively hurting people. We have environmental crises, mental health issues, disability issues, homophobia, racism, sexism. You have poverty. Exactly. There's so many. And so you look up in the sky, not literally, but you look up in the sky and you see all these dragons, all these social justice things, and you have a couple options. When you see that and your instinct is fight or flight. Fight, flight. It is just either you're going to try to do everything all at once and burn yourself out because you can't actually make a difference. And then you feel regret and hurt and people felt entitled to your time and you just, that resentment, not helpful. Or you run away. You pretend I'm not going to vote because even though I kind of care about democracy, I'm not going to do it. Like none of these things don't exist. The dragons aren't there because if they are, I'm overwhelmed. For me, I had to do something. Like I had to figure out how can I live in this world without just having it crush me. And for me, that ended up being like, well, these are dragons. And if this was a video game of some sort, like it would make more sense for each individual hero to choose a dragon and actively learn how to combat that dragon specifically. And I don't go at it alone. That's a huge part of it. Like you wouldn't be like in a game, you wouldn't be like, that dragon, I'm going to fight them alone. I mean, maybe like some games you'd be like, well, in Skyrim you do that all the time, but
How would it be if it was just me talking? If I didn't have you telling the story, and then, I help you by asking some questions, but, we're doing this together. I'm not doing it alone. And yeah, and so we're saying that.
well, and that actually goes even to a bigger point of NAMI itself. So National Alliance on Mental Illness, that is so if your dragon is a mental health, like it's mental health, then instead of being like, I'm going to start a new nonprofit or I'm going to do something, I have this energy, I want to help. Instead of starting like trying to reinvent the wheel, instead of being like, I'm going to go fight this dragon alone, there's people already fighting it. There's a lot of knowledge out there already. So going there and helping them out is really important. And I also want to make another point of this, which is if you are actively being hurt by a dragon, asking for help by people who are fighting them is really important. Because if somebody's on fire from a dragon, it should not be their responsibility to defeat the dragon. They're just trying to survive. I think that that's an important caveat here.
Domestic violence is an example of that, where domestic violence, if you see someone who's struggling with violence, they really do need help getting out.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of usually mental health around that, because I've experienced domestic violence myself. And so, but I needed help to get out, a lot of help. And not only that, but you're talking about like my daughter who has bipolar and ADHD, she needed my help when she was a teenager to get the right support. And is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I just don't want people to feel shamed and to be like, well, I don't have a dragon. I can't fight it right now because I'm just getting hurt. Like I can't even help right now because I'm just so hurt. And that's okay. Like,
I'm in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah. And that's up to the people who then can help. Like there are people who are trying and can help. And I try not to, I want to meet people where they're at, especially when it comes to this type of philosophy, because it's just really important not to be shaming people into advocacy. And I've seen that, and I always want to make sure like I separate.
So what I hear you saying is, am I hearing you saying that you understand philosophy and you can see when other people are battling dragons, even if they can't see it? And so are you, and what do you do with that? If you see people battling a dragon that you see it and they don't, what do you do?
Well, I try to give resources if they want them. And that's a thing. The other part is just sitting with them in it. And this is typically because most of the dragons that I'm going to see are mental health. Like my dragon, like the one that I'm actively fighting, typically is like around disability topics, primarily mental health or neurodivergent topics. And so I'm on a Minnesota Council for Mental Health, and then I'm on the Peer Leadership Council for NAMI. And so I'm trying, those are my teams. I'm not going at it alone. And so if I see people in a crisis, that you sit with them, or you use emotional CPR, or you suggest different resources that are available, NAMI connection groups. It depends on the level of resource and the person, because most of us are not mental health professionals. We're not going to go in there and be like, we're going to give medical advice. But what we can do is show them that like we care that they're being burned by a dragon. Like that's what it is, because there's so many different dragons out there that people are like, that's not even a thing. And it's like that's not a helpful tool if somebody's getting hurt and then you're just like ignoring it. And that's all what this is. This is a tool.
Right, and that's kind of the purpose of these stories that I'm publishing, is within every single story are tools that have been helpful for the people I'm talking with. So how do you take this and make it available to people?
I've created a
Help them out.
Substack. So I have Questify Your Life on Substack, the Questify Your Life with Sierra. And I talk about it. And then I'm also, since I have it's my full-time job now, not necessarily the content creation around Questify Your Life. That's a hobby. That is something I like that fills my cup. And so I'm actively trying to get better tools so I have better storytelling so that I can teach people these things if they're helpful. It's very much a take what you can use type of situation. But I do a lot of neurodiversity trainings for corporations, and I'm a poet speaker. Like that's how I make my money. And then in the kind of like on the airplanes, then I can write my little blogs about like how this is a quest, or because everything in my brain kind of goes through this filter of like, I'm in a video game. An example of this is I'll be going for a walk, and if depending on the day, because it just depends on whatever game my brain's about to play. Some days the game is like I'm a silly little alien who is my first time in this big, beautiful world, and I'm just looking around to see what's interesting and new and beautiful. Like that's the entire game. And it is one of my favorites. Other ones are if I'm going for a walk and I'm looking for a bunch of different animals or plants, and it feels like I'm kind of like collecting Pokemon. And that's another one where I end up, it's another little game. And there's countless of these. And with that, then so I have like the journey, I have my principles, my rewards, it's the math, right? It's like whatever there is, I'm just participating in the world. And then the quests are the actual goals, is like, what is the curiosity? And then how do I get there? And there's a ton of different quests. I have habit quests to keep myself doing things. I have my main quests, like whatever I pinned, like law school was a main quest, taking the bar was a main quest. Right now, I'm trying to figure out how to I call it my business quest is my main quest. I have rejection quests, which is just me trying to get rejected.
You get into that one, please.
Oh,
What are you
absolutely.
talking about? Yes, please explain.
I deal with rejection sensitivity, which a lot of neurodivergent people do. And when I end up being rejected, I often take it personally. Like there's a problem with the essence of me if I've been turned down. And because it didn't like that, I wanted to try to like figure out a way, be okay with getting rejected, because I own my own business, and a big part of owning your own business is the inevitability of being rejected. You're rejected all the time because you have to ask for things. You have to be very salesy, and that does not come naturally to me. So instead, I do rejection quests, which is find something that I believe that I could be really good at. The big thing is I have to give it like my best shot, and I have to be a good candidate for it. So I don't know. If there was a job to be an astronaut, like I'm not going to be the right person for that in the slightest. So I'm not going to apply for that as a rejection quest. That doesn't make sense for me. But
Right.
there are a lot of things that I've applied for. I've applied for a TEDx talk, have not got it, but I will try again later. I've applied to be on student government. I did get on. Oh yeah. Oh, there's so many of them. And most of them for a long time there, actually. For most of them, I just get denied. And the whole of it, let's go like take a step back, and like a rejection quest is like, there's a thing I want, and the goal at the end is to get rejected. You're actively trying to get a response to get rejected by putting in your best work. So you're trying to be like, I'm the best person for this, and here is why, and here's a good argument, and here's proof. Like I'm not bullshitting, excuse my language, but rather I'm just the right person. I think that I can do this and I want it. And the goal is to get rejected. If you get rejected, then you have completed the rejection quest, and then you get your reward points, then you can get your reward. And I do reward points kind of like arcade style. So because then you've won. If you got rejected, you've won. And if you didn't get rejected, yeah, you've lost that quest, but you got whatever you put your effort into. And you're practicing the skills of asking. And it helps.
I just love that there's like it gets past perfectionism, because that's another one of my things. You know, I often let the perfect get in the way of the good.
Yes.
And it sounds like what a fun way to just say, and I'm gonna just explore and see what happens.
And you never know. You just could be really, you don't know. NamiCon was one of these. So I spoke on this at the NAMI
June.
convention in June, and that's where we met. I applied for 3 different proposals. So 2 of them was with another advocate, and it was on more serious topics. And then I was like, well, I'm already spending the time to do stuff. I'll just throw in a fluffy, like a fun presentation, which is Questify Your Life, or like thing to present, but it tends to have to be like, it's a palate cleanser. Typically, that's how I like that presentation. It's about gamification, it's about positive psychology and self-satisfaction. And when you're at a mental health convention, you've been talking about like trauma and like really heavy things. And so it's just nice to have like a little bit. So I was like, I'll throw it in there. We'll see what happens. I don't know. And I got it. And then
It kind of blew up. Artist came, an artist.
Which was amazing. Like having a live artist in the room while you're doing, and it was a small room. I was sweaty. I was a bit chaotic. People were on the ground. We were adjusting chairs to make sure that like people had the room. It was one of the most amazing experiences, public speaking. Then I go up there and I'm just like, guys, I'm going to tell you about dragons. And they've been at this conference for a couple days now, like listening to like real legislative changes that NAMI has been able to advocate for and things. And I'm just like, let's talk about how to self-accommodate yourself using creativity, because that's really what this is. Like, Questify Your Life is a tool and a system to incentivize trying things out. Every little thing's just an experiment. And like in an experiment, if there's failure, you learn.
Seriously. Yeah, that's the thing. But in a lot of the kids that young folks I'm talking to, and most of them are youth presenters over the age of 18 to 30 for the Ending Silence program I do.
Yeah.
As I talk to them, family patterns of behavior have shut down the ability to be creative, to even understand what fun means. And I don't think that people understand how that creates depression.
Well, if you're shutting down, from my perspective of this, if you're completely shutting down play and you're shutting down fun and you're shutting down the ability to like feel joy, you're just shaming people. You're shaming people into a box to make other people comfortable. And that hampers people's mental health. How are you supposed to be creative and innovative and even productive if you can't find ways for it to be comfortable and long lasting? And so, yeah.
Thank you. I haven't heard anyone say it so well, but it's a new awareness that I have had because I have tolerated as a different generation. And so when I think that I've seen, as I talk to people from 18 to 30, a different understanding about what's acceptable and what's not from society and culture. And I think that this game and this idea of just play is almost revolutionary and frightening to some people. Yeah. But it's healing.
That reminds me of when I was applying to law school, I called the legal system a game, which the people proofreading my personal statement were not super pleased with that choice, because there is this like connotation of fun and playfulness and unseriousness about games. But if you're like looking at the core of the legal system, it kind of is, especially litigation. It kind of is a very high stakes game. I'm not like putting it down any way. It's life or death a lot of time.
Totally.
But yeah,
I think of people who are wizards who are casting spells with the words, and then the judges are like sorcerers who read through the past books and they go, well, this spell worked and that spell worked, so let's put it together in a judgment.
Right. It's a game. Or like contracts, for example, there's specific words that you need to use in order for it to actually be effective in the way that you want it to be. And I say all of that because there's the stigma around gaming and fun and playfulness. It's not professional. It's not serious enough. It's not something that it's cringy. Really what it is it's very cringy and it's uncool. And because in order to be successful and actually like get through your quests in a way that is public and seen, you're inevitably going to be seen as cringy. Like that's not something that I fear that much. I mean, I do fear it a little bit because I don't want to be bullied, but like, it's just, you're going, if I'm coming out and be like, I believe in dragons, and people take that out of context, it's gonna come across as cringy. But if people are like, well, I want more context, what does that mean?
But maybe they're not
They're
your
not.
people.
No, they're not. And like, I think a lot about Brene Brown's work in this type of context, because daring greatly, it's about like you're in the arena, and the people who are bullying you aren't in the arena. They're not the ones who are going on these journeys. They're not the ones who are actually trying actively to build something they want. Rather, they see somebody doing that and they're ready to tear you down. And that's an obstacle. It's a trap. It's a mimic in a dungeon. It's not. They're just part of the story, but they don't need to be the ones who have the control of the story. Yeah,
And that, right, you said right there, make sure that you are surrounded by your team that really does your back. And
yeah,
being able to discern, is that team member close in your circle, or do you need to put them like out here because they're not necessarily trustworthy, but you can see who do I work with and what's their strengths. And that's a critical thing I had to learn through NAMI about, like, who do you really trust and who you don't, because I didn't learn boundaries. And so I love what you're saying, because it really, for younger folks who've grown up with D&D, it's so easy for them to just grab onto this metaphor and really run with it and
yeah.
make sense of it.
And it can work with almost any game. So I use a bunch of things. So D&D, Skyrim. Sometimes I'll make like RuneScape, which is a very old game at this point. But there's also this idea of skill building, where you have like your skill trees, and basically like everything you do. And I do believe like everything you do, you can, like, even if you're starting at 0, you can build that skill up. I'm not saying that you can get it to like 100. You can't become an expert at everything, like, and that's okay. And by you, I mean myself. Like, there's certain things that I would not be able to actually get it to. That's helpful for me because I end up dealing with perfectionism, which is why this whole thing even exists. And so if I wasn't good at something right away, I would just quit. And now it's like, obviously I'm not good at it right away. I have to get to level 1 before I can get to level 30. And so I'm going to create, like, I'm going to do it messy. I'm going to do it with, like, it's not going to be as good, but if I get to the first step, then I can go to the second step and the third step, and I stop rushing it as much. At this point, it's less about perfectionism and more about, like, there's so many different skills I want to learn. And so actually, like, deciding where I'm putting my time so that I can build the skills is really important. And that's difficult. And I have no easy answer to that, but I do use dice a lot. I play dice games with myself.
Real life.
Oh yeah, I can.
With this whole.
I literally have dice up here, actually. Like, I have dice almost within like arm reach almost all the time. In my office at the law firm, I had dice. And so I'll explain, because what I do is I call it a dice game. I also have an app with dice, because like there's a lot going on here. But with that, I will make a list. It's basically a to-do list game, or something where, like, sometimes it'll be a menu. So like, okay, I'm having a really hard time right now. I can't decide. Like, I'm dealing with some decision fatigue, and I know I want to be doing something, but I can't get myself to just do it. So I'll make a list. So either I already have a ton of to-do lists. So maybe I'll be like, I want to be productive, or maybe I want to do something relaxing, or maybe I want whatever. I'll make a list, and that list will either be in numbered 4, 6, 8, 12, 6, 10, 12. It's dice. So let's say it's
okay.
Yeah. So because I have the D&D dice, so it'll be like, oh, I have a 10-sided dice.
Yes.
Die. And with that, so I have a list of 10 things. I'll roll the dice. I'll see what it pops up on. So number 8.
So if you rolled a 1 and you said 1 was relaxation, then you do that.
Yeah. Well, then it depends on, like, what does relaxation mean? So if I have like broad categories, an example of this, let's make it like a little bit more concrete. Let's say that it's an evening where I feel like I am just kind of in a rut. I feel a bit like I need to feel more grounded and put together and pulled together. So I'll make a list of everything that I know that can be helpful. Take a shower, clean, maybe like watch a TV show that like is upbeat, maybe do a meditation, like just write down all the things I already know that work for me. And so let's say there's 6 of those. Then I roll a 6-sided dice. And let's say it says a 4, and 4 is like, okay, you have 4, and that means shower. So there's basically 2 ways I will end up going about this. It just depends on whatever works. Like it is, you don't have to be perfect. It's not every single time it's the same exact way. Rather, I get a 4 and it's like, okay, that says shower. And I know doing a shower would be really good for me right now. I don't wanna. And so then I will end up procrastinating with something else on the list because I now know like what I don't. It makes it easier to do something else, or I'll just take the shower. And so it just depends on where I'm at. So I do this with my to-do list. Yeah. Every day. So I write down 8 things every day. Most of the time it's not like I don't fill in all 8. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all 8. And then I'll put down 6 things. And then as the day goes on, I'll put the last ones and I'll roll dice and just see like, well, that's what I'm going to do now. Or absolutely not. That's not happening right now. There's resistance. I'll deal with that resistance later, but I'll just do the one above it. So yeah, I roll dice a lot.
That is a cool way to live a creative life, because creativity is, if you do something and you're creating something like content like this, and you're a content creator as well, and it's a never ending project, and you can easily get not by it and not have the boundaries to make sure you do self-care or fill up your bucket or take care of your relationships or all these other things. And it sounds like this way of looking at the gamification is a way for you to balance your life in a way that's fun.
That's exactly it. So we've talked about quest, we've talked about journey, and that kind of gets us to character, which is like who you are as a person just in general. Like I split it up into 4 sections. So there's the aesthetic, like what do you look like? What earrings did you put on? That type of thing. Like it's just the aesthetics. When I'm playing Sims, I really enjoy like just dressing up the characters in the beginning. And so that's like the aesthetic part of it. The next one is simple but not easy. They're all the tasks that are like, this is simple in theory, but it is really, really hard. And it is not, a lot of people don't recognize how hard some things are. Like brushing your teeth is a really good example of simple but not easy. Like for me, I end up almost like being overly, like I know I should probably like do a tongue scraper and use an electric toothbrush and make sure you floss. But then if there's just so many things like, oh, but if you use a flosser, then you're using plastic, and then blah, 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 blah. And there's just so much narration in my brain about it. It's hard. And so
I'm with you. I have those things, just thoughts.
Exactly. There's so many. So it's simple but not easy. And then there is acceptance.
Yeah.
And these are all character. Like you still have to do it. Like, right? Like other examples are like your hair or whatever. Like you have to do it. So that's why I have it under character, because then I can do little quests, or I can like rewards for those things to make them easier. There's just a lot you can do if you're recognizing it. And then I also have it. So these are the 4 things, subcategories under character. There's acceptance. There's certain things that within your character you just can't change. Like my height is a good example of this. I now love my height. I'm 5'11". But as a child, that was really hard to be that big. And there's a bunch of other things. Like I have cysts in my body that are not super great and healthy. And they're like that, it makes life more difficult. Or I can't eat gluten. Mm-hmm. That sucks. And so trying to fight against that and be like anti certain parts of my character and who I am, it's not helpful. So going on acceptance quests and working on radical acceptance is really a huge part of this. And then finally, and definitely optionally, for me, it works really well, but for others, I can see it not being a part of how they want to like questify their life. And that's personas. And personas, I have 4 of them. And with that, for me, it comes from the idea of masking, which is an autistic idea of like you're actively masking in a way to make other people feel more comfortable. And so a lot of autistic individuals are shamed into being a very specific, acceptable version of themselves in society, even though it is actively harming them. For me, I still think that there is a lot of value in intentionally choosing who to put out there, because I don't want to inconvenience people. I don't want to be melting down and then have that affect my professional reputation. That is something that I am fearful of, and I wish I didn't have to be, but I am. And so rather I have personas, and I think of personas as either like little like clothing or like a shield or helmet or something from Skyrim that has like bonus points of certain types. or like a little fairy from Zelda where it's just like helping you out. And the four I have are Elf. Elf is the version of me that like you're seeing right now. It's very outgoing, very good with people. It's a bit too strong, but good with people, energetic, wants to share information, and is professional or close enough to professional that it counts. Hobbit is more like I'm taking care of myself. I'm taking care of the things around me. I'm working out. I'm cooking things. And I'm in the moment. I am enjoying these very tangible daily events that otherwise I probably would be dreading. But instead, I'm being a little more relaxed with it. It's part of life. Then I have fairy, just like a chaotic, creative energy that it doesn't matter if I'm failing, I can just try. And then gremlin, who I don't necessarily choose to go into, but like this is the version of me that I'm just like sitting on the couch for 3 hours on TikTok scrolling, been like a little too anxious to actually comment on anything, but being like, I support like that type of thing. And none of these are better than the others. I think they're all very important to have. And they're just categories. Something that pops up though when I talk about this is that some people are say things about like DID or multiple personality disorders, like, are you incentivizing people to go into parts? And for that, no, that's not what I'm advocating for here, because I'm thinking like it's more an incentive to choose the traits that are helpful in the moment. And if that is something that feels like good.
I mean, I'm sure the audience has, they go to school and they're one person. They come home, they're a different person. They go to the job, they're a different person. You go out to have a vacation and you're like a different person because you're acting different according to the situation. So I hear what you're saying. And again, probably the shame and the gamification plays a little bit of a role in it too. They're a little afraid of it.
Yeah, and I also teach this typically to mental health like audiences. And so oftentimes it'll be people with that diagnosis who are asking about it because they're like, is this safe to do? And I'm not a medical provider, so I can't say. But what I can say is you can gamify your life, you can questify your life without using personas. That's just one example of a tool amongst the other tools. There's the rejection quest, there's the rewarding yourself. You could do levels. Maybe you like a badge system. Maybe you like some sort of tournament or like a competition with your friends. Like there are tons of different ways to experiment and try out different ways of having fun in life that might work better for you. And so like that's what I have to say to that
Kind of
objection.
to me, what you just said right there encapsulate the whole concept here, what you're trying to do, which is as a whole, tell people, look, everybody, and I'm wondering, because, we have an epidemic of anxiety and depression in this country, especially after the pandemic. And that's one of the reasons I am here doing this podcast to talk, because adolescents are exponentially going to hospitals for suicide ideation, suicide attempts.
Yep.
They're incapable, they're getting frozen, not able to do things. And so what this whole podcast has done is to say, hey guys, maybe you just need to play a little bit. Yeah. Maybe that's just it. Maybe it's not as hard as you think it is.
And a lot of the time too, in those crisis situations, and as we talked about in the previous podcast, like that was me as a teenager. I was that teenager who was going in and out of hospitalizations and dealing with those crises. And I'm not saying that like thinking of everything in a game is going to solve mental health. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I'm trying to create easier ways for people to try. That's what helped me. And I think that using it creates a higher self efficacy and trust with you. You can, by doing games and going on quests and completing quests, you're building trust with yourself. And you're also just getting information. If you're able to like, I built this quest and I didn't complete it in the slightest, you've learned a lot there. Every time you fail a quest, you've learned more than you have if you actually completed it. And that's how I fail quests all the time. I fail things all the time. And that's okay.
But has this gamification and Questify Your Life, has it helped you to, because this is what I want to leave people with. I want to leave people with hope, and you're doing that. You're doing a great job. But by questifying your life, have you been able to put into balance more? Some of the things were out of balance when you were younger and going through all the crises.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's able to like focus it, right? Like one of the things is support systems, like knowing that you need a support system and that you just like, you can't do this alone as a huge pillar of Questify Your Life, but that is like even more important for a mental health, like recovery journey. You need your people, you need to know. Same with medication. A medication is a tool, it's a power up type of thing in my brain. I use medication to manage my symptoms. A therapist is a good advisor for you to have like something separate from your team that you can go to. Like it's just reframing things into a growth mindset. And like it's more fun and you're aiming to like, well, I have some power. Like in a world where I am told again and again, I am not good enough, I am not pretty enough, I need to buy this thing to be better. I'm not going to be as good as that person because I'm always stuck in comparison. In a world where we're just constantly given those messages, it's nice to be able to be like, that's not the game I'm playing. That's not a quest for me. I get to choose, and it's empowering.
Right. Yes, that tickles me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hope the audience is as empowered as I'm feeling right now, just about, man, just lighten up, have some fun, play a game. This life is a quest. It's a journey. It's not perfect, black and white. It's all shades of gray and lots of even rainbows thrown in there. So
Absolutely.
thank you. I think that we have captured everything. And so can you tell people where to go and what to do maybe to get involved in this or find out more about it?
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about this, I have a Substack called Questify Your Life. There will also be podcasts and YouTube videos shortly. I'm just getting started on the quest of learning how to make long form content. And additionally, I have sierragrandy.com, which includes all of my work, not only about Questify Your Life, but also about my neurodiversity speaking and consulting.
Wonderful. And for the audience, I will have it later on a resource. But Sierra, it's been such a pleasure and such a joy to think of things in a different way and have fun with life. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So when's the last time you just watched children play? Turns out we learn a lot about life through play. We practice relationships, learn strategies, and for sure, explore emotions. That's why play can also help us on our mental health journey. That's what Sierra Grandy has been exploring. She transformed the heroic quest she played in Dungeons and Dragons into a strategy for life. It's really cool. As it turns out, outwitting a dragon with a band of allies can also help you deal with ADHD and depression. I mean, who knew? But she's not alone. Child psychologists and therapists have been using play therapy for years. Imaginary companions, puppets, and art therapy can help kids deal with anxiety, depression, and autism, and there's more. Now doctors and counselors use the rewards and incentives of video games to help people with mental health. Yeah, there's a benefit to video games. It's hard to believe, but there is. This emerging field is called gamification, and it relies on specially designed video games. Of course, commercial video games can also cause problems. In fact, the International Classification of Disease has a section on gaming disorders. This is when video games become an addiction, upending your life. But gamification refers to games that become mental health therapy. Studies show rewards, quests, challenges, and point systems built into these games can help people make changes that benefit their mental health. That might include counting your daily steps to earn rewards. Just don't make that ice cream. It might involve biofeedback to help control anxiety and negative thoughts. Gamification can improve mental health and well-being and reduce the symptoms of depression and anxiety. And not just in kids, but people of all ages. I mean, even my husband plays. Here are just a taste of studies on the power of play. You can find links to those studies on our website at strengthbeyondstruggle.org. First, let's talk about play therapy. The Indigo Project Online listed a host of benefits of play therapy for children. It helps kids express emotions in a nonverbal way. It develops problem-solving skills, improves verbal and nonverbal communication skills, improves self-esteem, reduces anxiety and depression, and helps heal from trauma. One meta-analysis of 93 studies found play therapy had significant benefits, especially if the therapist involved the parents. And here are some studies of gamification. Use of specialized video games can boost mental health and reduce anxiety and depression, according to a meta-analysis of 42 studies with 6,000 people. The study found these games generally worked better for males than females, but that's probably because they play games for recreation a lot more than females do. I mean, I don't. My husband keeps trying, doesn't work. The games worked better for people with generalized anxiety and depression than clinical depression and anxiety. The games improved a sense of mental well-being. Well, that's a lot, and enough for today. If you want to learn more from Sierra, tune into our other podcast for the episode on the power of telling your story, and check out the research notes on our website. Thanks for joining us on Strength Beyond Struggle.
It's okay to just be me. We're all made to be unique. It's okay to have my needs. It's okay to be me. What's easy for others are struggles for me. I do things differently. Doesn't make me broken. It just makes me me. People out there help me through, ones who care about me and you. Through my struggles I find my strength. Feels so good to be me. What's easy for others are struggles for me. I do things differently. Doesn't make me broken. It just makes me me. People helping me to get through have their own struggles too. Even though they have their strength, they are human like me. Through these struggles we build our strength. We all want to feel healthy. Even though we make mistakes, struggles build our strength.